understand it, that as soon as Amazon can predict you with 90% accuracy, they'll ship the things to your door before you know you even need it. And then as long as you're only returning less than 5%, they make money, and they close that gap on accuracy, on knowing you.
They will get there.
Right?
They will get there.
And that's who they really want to become.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Part of their business. But we should remember that the part of their business that makes up more than half of their profits and more than half of their free cash flow is their cloud services business. It's an empire where they basically just lease computing power and storage to any company on earth that doesn't want to build and maintain their own data center, which is most companies. Amazon can do it far better and far more cheaply than you can do it yourself. And they've been extraordinary. They've been adopting the artificial intelligence hardware to basically be the largest provider of artificial intelligence computing power in the world. And so what they're doing with their cloud services business is actually directly contributing to the advancements that we're seeing in artificial intelligence companies.
So I just talked to somebody on Capitol Hill who said, Glenn, I know you're worried about who gets AI first. I think anybody who is thinking about this stuff is worried about who gets it first, right? Putin says whoever gets it, whoever arrives at it first pretty much controls everything because you'll be so far up front. And he said, don't worry. He said the government is way ahead. And I don't necessarily feel good about the government having it either.
Right.
But is that right? Who has the servers? Who has the muscle to be able to do this? Is it the government? Is it Google? Who has that kind of muscle?
This is really interesting. Believe it or not, the power and the advancement right now is happening in the private sector. So did you see the proposal from Chuck Schumer? This was just a few days ago, proposing that the U.S. government invest the headline was him asking for the U.S. to invest $100 billion into artificial intelligence so that the U.S. could lead in AI. Of course, you dig in a little bit deeper, and the funds are going to be spread out like peanut butter, like they usually are. We'll put a little bit in 5G research, and some in quantum computing, and some over here in cybersecurity and biotechnology and everything.
If you were serious, you would do a Manhattan Project.
There you go. Yes. My favorite in that space, and maybe we can get to this later, is actually clean energy, which is nuclear fusion, not fission, fusion, radiation-free. That is what needs a Manhattan Project.
Could a how far away are we from a quantum computer solving that kind of a problem?
So that's one of the most important use cases of quantum computing, which is developing the AI that can control the plasma reaction in a nuclear fusion reactor. That's the biggest challenge that we have today right now with nuclear fusion, and that quantum computer can help solve that problem. I'm really excited about that area.
How far away are you?
I believe my prediction on compact nuclear fusion reactors is we will have our first viable net energy producing nuclear fusion reactor within 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
And I've done a lot of research on this. And
what do you mean compact?
Compact, which means, let's think about the size of a semi-trailer. A nuclear fusion reactor the size of a semi-trailer has the ability to produce enough output to fuel 100,000 homes. Baseload energy, completely clean, no radioactive waste of any kind, no risk of any kind of meltdown.
What's its fuel? Excuse me for not knowing how this works. What's its fuel?
Some of the most common elements in the universe, forms of hydrogen. It's incredible. 1 unit of energy in to maintain the reaction will produce 6 to 7 units of energy out.
Wow.
It's incredible. Why we haven't been investing in this? The only thing I can think of is that The existing energy industry has kind of been creating friction so that we don't do this.
I think there's also a movement. You know, I was with GM in 2007, and they let me drive one of their hydrogen cars for a week. It was the greatest.
Yeah.
It was the greatest.
Yeah.
They didn't have the right size battery yet, but they had everything worked out. I think it was with Shell that they were going into bed with to make Shell stations also hydrogen stations.
Yes, yes.
You can make hydrogen at night, in the downtime of a nuclear plant. Just make hydrogen.
Yeah.
And the first thing the government did after, TARP and all of that crap was go into GM and say, cancel that, Chevy Volt.
Right. It's very expensive today to make hydrogen fuel. This is not in defense of not doing it. We can definitely work on the cost curve. We can solve that problem.
Yeah, that's solvable.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only reason we're bringing that up is because I think we've been stalking that deer one way or another for a long time. Man's stupidity, greed, and politics comes into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So back to Schumer in the $100 billion request. Take a guess at how much, this is just in the United States alone, between 2016 and 2018, how much the private sector invested in artificial intelligence companies.
No idea.
Wild guess.
It's got to dwarf what the government said.
So just keep in mind, this is just artificial intelligence. The venture capital community, private investors funded U.S. artificial intelligence companies to the tune of $105 billion between 2016 and 2018. And that doesn't include what's been happening in 2019. 2019, I believe, will see even larger numbers. So more than $50 billion will have been invested in artificial intelligence companies in the United States in 2019. Which means over the course of 4 years, we will have spent something on the order of, invested, I should say, $160, $170 billion. That's how much the private sector has been investing in this technology. It's extraordinary. We're not behind. We're ahead. All of the intelligence, the best artificial intelligence researchers, where do they want to work? Here in the United States. Why? Because the money's here to invest in these moonshots, to make these incredible breakthroughs in AI technology.
So is it a given to you that it would be Google that gets to AI first because of the amount of information?
This is a nuanced question, and it's actually very exciting. The developments in just the last 12 months, there have been some incredible developments on the ability for AI to infer, to use a simpler word, is to think, with smaller data sets. So you're absolutely right. If I think back to 2017, the only players that were making real progress in artificial intelligence were these large corporations. Why? Because they had the largest data sets. The hardest problem that small companies had is that they couldn't afford to get the large data sets to train their artificial intelligence. So it wasn't as good. But this category of artificial intelligence called inference has made incredible strides just in the last 12 months. And the thing is, when researchers publish new software algorithms that can do these things, they're open and available in the public. Everybody can see them. Every motivated and dedicated entrepreneur, every small company has access to the most bleeding edge technology the moment it's been published. The cat's out of the bag. We can't stop this from happening, because if you need computing resources, what do? You go to Amazon and you rent it for a few seconds, for a few minutes, for a few hours. Any company can afford that. And so, which is why, this is why these developments are such an inflection point for society right now.
How far ahead we used to think that China was just a good copier. They just could copy things. They weren't imaginative, that America had the lock on, or the West, but America primarily, had the lock on that entrepreneur, that dreamer, that inventor, and China would steal it and copy it. But they are stealing and copying, but they're also adding their own things to it they're starting to show signs of real ingenuity. Is that right or wrong?
I concur.
Okay.
Very accurate. Yeah.
So are they far ahead of us? Where are we in the world with them? How much danger? And I only say this way. They are a dark figure in the world, I believe, and the madness that could be accomplished with this kind of technology in the hands of that kind of a power structure there wouldn't be a Jew alive on the planet, probably by 1937, if Hitler had anything close to this.
Yeah, absolutely frightening. And all we have to do is look to what happened in Tibet in the 80s, and now we look at what's happening to the Uyghurs in the north right now.
And nobody is paying attention.
It's absolutely insane, and it is frightening. I am very, very deeply concerned about this. Where are they ahead? Two really interesting areas are their mobile infrastructure that they put in place. And I'm not talking about the networks themselves, but I'm talking about companies like Alibaba, the China equivalent of Amazon, or Tencent and WeChat. Their messaging and application platforms. They've turned them into these incredibly powerful commerce platforms, all on the phone. Whether you want to book a doctor's appointment or make a bank transfer or chat with a friend or send a message, it doesn't matter. It all happens through this particular application. And across these platforms, they have access to roughly, let's just say 85 to 90% of their entire population. And let's remember, these companies are very tightly linked to the centralized communist Chinese government. We don't have that in the United States. They have this pervasive network. And what's really interesting and very topical right now is they're in the process of launching their own digital currency. We can think of this as a digital version of the renminbi. So the ability to eventually completely eliminate their own fiat currency and go completely digital, a digital reserve currency. And it won't be long before they start to transition their international trade relationships to that platform as well. China has been very progressive with something called blockchain technology. And the US has been very restrictive with a very heavy hand from a regulatory environment. I've been spending a lot of time in DC being part of that discussion and hopefully trying to influence policymakers in a positive way so that we can actually support innovation in this country with that technology. Another great example of something being out of the bag.
Blockchain, how's that affected by quantum computing? Is it still as locked in or not?
Well, the biggest challenge with quantum computing is security. Right.
So can it? Blockchain is much more than 256.
If you have blockchains that use mining to mine and solve these cryptographic problems, you're pretty much stuffed within 2 years. But the great thing is that it's software, and so it emerges and a new version is released. And they can develop new technology to make it resistant to a quantum computing attack.
So would in the United States, if we decided to go to digital currency, part of the idea of cryptocurrency is I have freedom, and it's not used politically per se. It's not controlled. It's a limited amount. I mean, it is the gold standard digitally, and it frees me up from the governments of the world. I can take it wherever I want. I can spend it however I want.
Yeah.
If the United States does digital currency, it doesn't change anything from fiat currencies because they can change the value. And is there an appetite? I don't see people in Washington as real cutting edge. I mean, you talk to them about Bitcoin, and they probably still don't know much about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility that we are moving in that direction?
I believe it's inevitable that